The Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. For more than 2 centuries, it's had one main job: to gather plants and seeds from all parts of the globe. It's a treasure house. There are more species of plant within the walls of these gardens than anywhere else on Earth. This is a living, growing collection of over 30,000 species. Guarded by an army of scientists, there are 7 million preserved specimens here. That makes Kew unique. And that's why this team of filmmakers, led by David Attenborough, has come here, making it their base for a hugely ambitious, year-long project. They are going to explore the plant kingdom, expose its wildest secrets, and capture sites previously known by only a handful of botanists in ways that have never been attempted before. We will see plants as they really are, how they grow and change and move.
Today we can do such extraordinary things with cameras and playing with time. You can't go anywhere in the world and see plants in the way that we filmed it in Kew.
These sites will all be captured in stunning 3D. It's an unprecedented technical challenge, but one that promises incredible rewards.
You see this fantastic coloured bloom opening, but in 3D. It's mesmerizing. I mean, it's really almost transcendental.
This is the story of the tricks, the technology, and the trouble that went into making David Attenborough's Kingdom of Plants. A glimpse behind the scenes of an extraordinary series.
Going behind the scenes is always a kind of naughty privilege, isn't it?
Sometimes filming natural history is a question of going into the wild, setting up a camera, and waiting for the magic to happen. That's not how Kingdom of Plants will work. This is a series that depends on meticulous planning, high precision technology, and often a carefully controlled environment. Today's challenge involves ultra-high-speed shooting, an epic journey, and some bats. In a finished sequence which will show how plants use animals to ensure their own survival, viewers will apparently see fruit bats flying through Kew's cactus houses, mimicking their extraordinary migration through the deserts of Mexico and Arizona.
To get across the desert, they need fuel stops. So on the way out, these pregnant females stop in regular places onto the saguaro cactus in particular, to drink nectar. The trouble, of course, with that, with the bats, is that, of course, they weren't there.
Releasing these bats in Kew, which was an initial idea, we were recommended by Trevor that was probably not quite so good. He was slightly worried that they might get spined on the cacti. Apparently, as they haven't grown up around cacti in the wild, if we were to release them in the cacti room at Kew, there'd be quite a lot of bat fatalities quite quickly.
The stars of this epic adventure are owned by animal coordinator Trevor Smith.
Just building the bat enclosure, we have to make sure absolutely 100% they can't get out.
It's like with little fairies. It's a very controlled environment here, and Trevor the Batman is going to release them down his passage, and hopefully they'll fly straight to their cage, past the cameras. It's great if you can be out there on location in Mexico over the course of 6 months. We've got a day here to try and get it all. So we've got to get the bats flying singly, in groups, try and give a sense of a migration of an entire flock.
We will film slow motion at 2,000 frames per second, so we should, in theory, if everything goes right, see this bat flying extremely slowly so we can see every single movement in it.
My problem is, because they're nocturnal, I've had to change the work patterns around so they feed during the day. They're really hungry. My worry is to keep them in a contained area so they can fly in and feed.
If one escapes, should...
Please don't say that. I'll be here forever. I will not leave unless I get my bat back. I can't afford that.
I'm terrified of bats, so I'm not just letting anybody other than the camera know about that, but I look forward to today being over.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And now let's bring the cage closer to the camera.
Okay, so I need someone on the other side of the table.
Trevor, can you do that? I think Ollie, Will's there. Will's on. Lights on, please turn over. Camera's ready.
It takes a few goes to get camera, lights and bat all working together.
So going?
Right there. Lights off, please.
Well, the bat didn't fly that well. It seemed to just sort of drop out, but technically we're sort of happy with that.
A degree of patience is going to be needed. But eventually it all starts to come good.
It's great.
Lights on, please.
Make sure you've got those legs soft.
Check the shot, please, for Will.
All it's going to need is a little digitally enhanced moonlight and a certain voice.
Action.
Pregnant females, 100,000 of them, are on their way to special maternity caves in the north where they will give birth to their young. The bats get all the nectar they need to sustain their journey, and in return, they pollinate the cacti. This annual bat migration coincides exactly with the blooming of the night-flowering cacti. So the bats can fly along a nectar corridor. And so can cross a patch of desert that otherwise and at other times would be impassable to them. The techniques we have these days, are video techniques these days, can give an insight into plants in a way that we've never had it before. You can go to Africa and watch elephants, and you can see more or less what you can see on television. But you can't go anywhere in the world and see plants in the way that you can see it on television.
Naturalists have always known that the key to understanding how the plant kingdom works lies in understanding plant time, tracking changes that often happen too slowly for the human eye to spot. The team relies on time-lapse, the technique of recording 1 or 2 frames every minute, then playing them back at normal speed to reveal events that are otherwise hidden from view.
Organisms that we just dismiss as being just plants that just kind of sit there, and you can reveal their true nature, which is that they can be very aggressive, they can parasitize one another, they can wrestle with one another, they can grow at extraordinary speeds. One of my favourite shots in the programme, I don't suppose it'll be everybody's, but there is a liana which puts out tendrils. It doesn't climb itself, it wants to get a lift from some other plant that's growing up. And so it moves around, groping for this plant, and does it quite quickly, actually. And in time-lapse, it looks like a whip that's going round. And when it hits a plant, it then curls around it. While it does that, we go, you put that soundtrack on. Which, of course, is an invention, but nonetheless, it makes the point very, very vividly.
3D time-lapse is a new technique, but it is the heart of the kingdom of plants. It can condense hours, days, even months of gradual change into a few dramatic seconds.
This is the water lily house, the hottest and most humid environment in Kew. It was built in 1852 to accommodate the latest botanical discovery, the giant Amazon water lily.
Even when David and the team aren't on site at Kew, there are always cameras snapping away. For technology as sensitive as this, The heat and the humidity of Kew's greenhouses are a big challenge.
Time-lapse is tricky anyway because you've got technical issues, you've got lighting issues, you've got camera issues, and you've got the plant issues. Plants will behave on their own schedule. 3D adds complication to that because you've got to capture your left and your right eye image on a very small scale, so you can't employ normal rigs. So we're using specialist motion control rigs which have been developed specifically for three-dimensional time-lapse.
If the camera fails or is bumped 1 millimetre out of position, or if the plants don't do what's expected of them, hundreds of hours go to waste.
So one of the sequences we're doing in the programme is a water lily sequence, and that's quite tricky for several reasons, because water lilies move a lot, actually quite quickly, and there are water droplets coming from the greenhouse roof, and there's air bubbles coming up from the water.
Now it's February and the pond is almost bare. But in a few weeks, exotic water lilies of all kinds will be sprouting. The ancestors of today's water lilies, as we know from their fossils, were among the first plants to produce flowers.
So, 300 million years on the planet, 150 years at Kew, 5 painstaking weeks to film, 16 seconds of screen time. But what if you want to show how the whole kingdom of plants has evolved? No time-lapse can compress that much information. So one of the series sequences relies on computer-generated imagery to tell what may be natural history's biggest story.
The Tree of Life shot is a big moment in the series where David's in a room describing the evolution of plants, and we wanted a kind of an animated graph or chart, something very strong visually to demonstrate this fairly complicated concept. David had a few ideas of how it should look, and the director was keen for me to communicate with David because he did have such strong views on it.
You can draw a diagram of an ancestry of an animal or the plant kingdom or whatever, but to bring it to life, you need to do it in 3 dimensions, and you need to make it move. You also want to carry a lot of information. And you can only do it, of course, in a very schematic senses, but it does give you an idea of the complexity of the history of life.
The trickiest part with this graphic was to convey the information that needed to be portrayed to the viewer. It is a fairly complicated graphic, and just getting the look right was probably the hardest thing. I had to think about how it would grow while I was trying to design how it would look as well. Plants generally grow in a kind of slightly more haphazard, in a more rhythmic manner, whereas this, I wanted it to be a bit more fluid and more graph-like than that. I was on set when they filmed the room. I took loads of stills, I took lots of measurements of where the cameras were, the lenses, distances, made notes of all where the lights were, with the mind that I was going to have to create this computer-generated object to fit into the room. David was on set having to act as if this Tree of Life was there. Obviously it wasn't there, and there were a few heart-stopping moments on set when he was looking all over the place, and I was thinking, don't look over there, it's not going to be over there. But we managed to work that one out.
It begins with algae, the simplest of the plants, which are followed by the mosses. The thickness of the rising branches indicates the relative number of species in each individual group. For For the first half of the plant's evolutionary history, all the branches of plant life flourished roughly equally. But then, 140 million years ago, there was an explosive radiation of species, Darwin's mystery. These were the angiosperms, flowering plants. Their evolution was more gradual than Darwin had thought, but there is no question that the angiosperms quickly became the dominant group. They diversified into a huge range of species, which have occupied almost every known habitat on Earth. But what happened to stimulate this dramatic radiation? There was a happy coincidence of two events. The first was a doubling in the genetic material of plants, allowing them to evolve more quickly when their environment changed. The second was one such change: the development of a unique relationship between plants and animals.
If you want to understand how plants really work, you have to see them from an insect's point of view.
We are using the robot camera, and the primary use of it is to recreate insect vision. There's a sequence where we look at various pollinators, the relationship with flowers, and we were hoping that something like this might give us a little bit of insect vision, insect flight sensation.
If you're interested in the mechanics of how you make films, these little toys that turn on every now and again are very interesting.
Chopper cams are a new toy for filmmakers. They're only possible with the advent of ultra-efficient lithium-ion batteries. The camera this one carries is far smaller than those used in the rest of the filming. It weighs less than a kilogram. Still, it's an energy-hungry system. It's always a race to get the shot before the batteries drain and the rotors stop turning.
Thanks. That's it. And then back up to that height we were at before.
Flight time would be approximately 7 minutes with the 3D camera we're flying with today. The concentration is immense. The inputs and the control, it's a lot of practice, and it is fun, but it's really stressful as well.
It's about to get much more stressful. They're going to try flying inside one of the greenhouses.
This part is probably the least Q-friendly part, as we're going to send the helicopter into their glass house, which has raised a few issues, but they very kindly said we can do it.
The greenhouses that they built in the 19th century were their own invention. They were the first big glass houses in the world. And there's a pot plant living there that went there in the 18th century and is still there. I mean, it's the oldest pot plant in the world.
We're hoping not to shred anything in there.
Thousands of panes of antique glass, a priceless 230-year-old plant. These aren't normal flying conditions.
You know, there's a little bit of breeze going through there. It's tricky because, I mean, the tricky thing is that I'm flying back out against the wind, and so you will get a little bit of movement. Just depends on the breeze at the time. That's nerve-wracking, man.
With the tricky stuff done, the chopper's sent off to explore. What it discovers is one of the most admired sights in the natural world.
Of course, half the time you think, I hope viewers will understand how extremely clever we are being. But actually, that's a mistake. I mean, the viewer shouldn't be dazzled by technical splendor. He should just be enlivened by the insight that it gives you in that part of the film. So it's a delight. It's a lovely little toy.
But there's more to this than insect vision. The insect sense of smell is far more acute than ours, and the challenge for the team is finding a way to demonstrate this. Though they're working with cutting-edge technology, no one's yet found a way to capture and broadcast smell.
The brief is to try and find smell through pictures, so we had to come up with a concept that would enable us to show the viewer something as abstract as a smell in a visual form. The director wanted to show that each flower would have a different scent, and so we visualised that as a different colour. This is all completely computer-generated smoke. It took quite a long time to render and layer in the appropriate way, but yeah, it's all CG.
Plants don't rely solely on colour to attract their insect pollinators. They also produce smells. In fact, as I stand here, I'm surrounded by a swirling vortex of perfumes of many kinds. But unhappily, the human nostrils can only detect about 5% of them. Insects do very much better.
The purpose of this shot was to convey these what are called volatiles, which are tiny, oily little particles in the air that plants release to communicate with other plants and insects. And we wanted to be right in amongst them, so the 3D effect is enhanced. It's a big sort of 3D moment, I guess you call it, where the particles are around the viewer. This shot probably took 2 to 3 weeks.
We can imagine microscopic droplets of these volatile oils suspended in the air. Many insects have antennae that are extraordinarily sensitive to them. Some can detect a concentration of just a few parts per billion.
Seasons come at Kew and seasons go, but some things remain constant. Noise is one of them.
Turn over. Turning, wait on the plane.
Yeah.
371.
We're going to wait for the plane?
Yes, we'll wait for the plane to disappear.
Edge.
Botanical paradise it may be, but Kew sits in the middle of London, directly beneath the Heathrow flight path.
I've never succeeded in managing to persuade British Airways or the Heathrow Airport to change any one jot or tittle of their plans, even on the occasion when I was actually producing the Queen. They said, no, I can't do that.
Okay, camera is set.
You have to start the camera and one thing and another while there's still actually a noise.
Here we go then, quiet please.
And wait for the recorders to say, go, and then you say, ah, no, blah, 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 blah. And the temptations, of course, say very quickly, but you have to be very calm.
And action.
These are the fruiting bodies of a fungus. Their function is to produce dust-like spores, which are then blown away through the woodland to grow elsewhere. But these are only a tiny part of the fungus. Most of the body of the fungus is beneath the ground, a tangle of tiny threads which extend for hundreds of yards through the forest. And we're now beginning to realize that those threads are essential for the growth and health of many of the woodland plants.
So the second episode in the series is all about the invisible world of Kew, the invisible world of plants and the kind of things you can't see with the naked eye. It may seem counterintuitive, but a big part of the invisible world of the kingdom of plants is actually fungi, which aren't plants, but they support the plant kingdom. They live underground. I mean, our story is the fact that they live in this vast network underground and recycle material that plants can live on and make life possible for plants.
Capturing what goes on in this hidden world requires a unique set of skills. The only man for the job is veteran macro photographer Tim Shepherd.
I've worked on David's programmes for a long time, in many programmes before, so I knew that he was confident that I'd be able to come up with the goods, and I'm always confident that he will, so I was quite happy to, to get going on things, and I knew we were going to get some great stuff. Going well.
I've known Tim for a long time, and there may be somebody that has his particular combination of talents to the degree that he has them, but I don't know who that is. As far as I'm concerned, Tim is out on his own.
Actually, he's in Devon. In his secret laboratory, cunningly disguised as a picturesque barn, Tim both makes things grow and films them as they do it.
This is the first fungus take, which I think now has finished growing. I don't think the mushrooms are going to grow anymore, so I'm about to de-rig it. When you're filming with a normal speed camera, for doing 3D, you need to have two cameras, so you can get your left and right image at the same time. When you're doing 3D in time-lapse, you have got a possibility, because you're only taking one frame at a time, you can actually use one camera, take your right frame, and then using the same camera, move it slightly and take your left frame. What we have here is a little rig that moves the camera sideways, and I'll just run it to show you how it does a shot. It takes the right frame, moves across a bit, takes the left frame, and then resets itself for the next one. So the mushrooms haven't changed in that very short period. And then they'll change a bit for the next frame, which will be in, say, 10 minutes' time. So I separate those afterwards on the computer, and then they can be sequenced as two separate shots. And then when they're put together in the 3D, you see the stereoscopic effect.
In fact, it's only when the thousands of photos are strung together, often after weeks of effort, that Tim can possibly know if the shot has worked.
There we are, just a little bit of woodland floor. Whoops. Finished with. Go on to the next one.
He is a superb technical cameraman to start with. He has a mechanical bent, which means that he can build bits of machinery that will make his camera do certain things. He has an artistic talent, which means that he can build marvellous sets that really look perfectly natural and wonderful and beautiful. And he also has an extraordinary green fingers. I mean, he can get things to grow under conditions which are highly artificial.
I've got a couple of trays just here that I've got mushrooms hopefully growing on them, or rather the fungus is growing in this log and in the soil that's around it. And these are ones that I collected last year.
Mind you, he has disasters. I mean, in the early days, I remember very well, a wonderful shot he had of a plant that was developing. It came up like that. It opened its petals most beautifully, and then woof, an army of snails came in and actually demolished the thing on camera. Oh, well, start again.
I've got a tropical growing chamber in the other room. I've got Venus flytraps growing, trying to get them to the right stage. So it's a continuous battle to keep the momentum going and keep the cameras working.
Most of the shooting of this series must take place out of hours in the precious window between sun up and opening time. A couple of dozen people, half a ton of kit. Shooting in 3D is a complicated, unwieldy business, and today the crew really gets to feel it. They're going to be working 80 feet off the ground at what is the high point of any trip to Kew, the treetop walk.
For me, it's easy. I just say, come on, guys, let's get up onto the walkway. They do all the heavy lifting. But, you know, the camera's very heavy. It weighs 70 kilos or something. There are now smaller cameras and smaller rigs. For lots of different reasons, we haven't been as happy with them when we've tried them.
Nothing happens in the 3D world without meticulous planning. What gets shot today will only take up a few seconds of screen time, but it's been 6 months in the making.
It's winter in Kew. Our cameras over a year can show just how dramatic seasonal changes are. It's so cold and the sun's rays are so feeble that plants can't grow.
When we were here last, it was February and there were no leaves on the trees. We've got a series of shots and we've actually put marks down on the walkway where the tripod was in the winter. And we're going to come and put the camera in exactly the same positions and replicate those shots so that we can dissolve from winter to summer. And you should just see that, you know, the tree shapes will be there, but then they'll just fill with leaves and it should look spectacular.
Okay, standing by.
They're all set. All they need now is for the weather to play ball. While what's required is a glorious blue-skied sunny day, what's on offer is something a little duller, a little greyer, a little more typically British. They've just got to hope that the cloud burns off before the doors open and the first visitors arrive. And yet, while filming here is tricky and very, very time-consuming, it just couldn't be done anywhere else.
Kew is a remarkable place. Of course, it's a world-class place. Many people, perhaps those in Kew, would say it was the top of the botanic gardens in the world, largely because it was one of the very first. I mean, it was established in the 18th century at a time when Britain was scouring the world. Cook was going out on his expeditions and so on and bringing back in specimens, and it's a remarkable thing that the specimens that were brought back from those early explorations scientifically are of crucial importance. If you want to know what a species, a plant is, how do you tell? The answer is, in the end, if there's a quarrel, you come to Kew and look at the specimen that was the first one that got its name.
Back on the treetop walk, it is, of course, David's job to explain what we're going to see.
And action. Up here, in this walkway through the treetops, you can watch the transformation as it happens. This hopeless sight. Can I just go straight on? Action. Up here.
There are a few false starts. And we're good to go.
And in your own time, David.
Up here in this walkway through the treetops, you can see the process as it happens. In just a few weeks, the trees clothe themselves in green. The amount they produce of leaves and shoots is extraordinary. In just 1 acre, it can weigh 4 tons.
To complete the sequence, they still need that one special shot of the treetops. Finally, and in the nick of time before the gates open to the public, the sun puts in an appearance. It means they can finally reveal an amazing sight that all too often escapes our notice.
What do we think?
With each new season, new worlds reveal themselves. In late spring, the longer days and stronger sunlight cue the emergence of leaves.
And so new technology allows us to glimpse what's really happening inside the kingdom of plants. Witness things that the human eye alone could simply never pick up. Now, in this carefully controlled studio setup, the team is going to go further. To capture the extraordinary way in which insects see light. This is turning out to be another TV first. It's not simply about special cameras or clever lighting. In fact, they've had to start from scratch and pretty much build a jungle.
Here we go then, and action.
We can't be sure exactly how insects see the world, but certainly it's very different from the way in which we do. We can see only part of the spectrum of light, from long wavelengths, which are down in the red, through orange and yellow and green and blue, to violet, which is short wavelength light. You can do tests on insect vision to see how they react to certain things, whether they do or whether they don't, so that you can plot the visual splan, the visual sensitivity across the spectrum. Our own particular sensitivity is just ours. It's not the same as a lion's, and it's not the same as quite a lot of things. And insects is certainly not the same as insects.
We know that insects certainly see something we can't: ultraviolet light. The plan is that with all other lights blocked out and under strong UV lamps, flowers will appear to us as they might to an approaching bee.
We need to work out how to actually film the fluorescence. So I've been talking to a photographer in Norway. To his knowledge, no one's ever done this. So we're collaborating with him, getting ideas about how to actually film the plants in ultraviolet. We need to do this on an incredibly small scale, where we're looking at probably about 1 or 2 millimeters of the stamen to actually get the pollen grains. And we've got to be able to rig the camera accurately and film that in ultraviolet, in 3D, as well as trying something complicated like getting a move. We're going to film it with proper visible lights, and we've got to work out a way of then dissolving those into ultraviolet.
When you use a UV camera like that and start looking at things, you discover that flowers look quite different. It's not only that they are a different colour, that a red doesn't look that right, it looks more purplish, but there are detailed markings that are only visible in ultraviolet light.
The result is these images: flowers as they look to the creatures that matter, the insects. No one has filmed this way before. And next, the team will attempt another first, capturing in 3D an event that occurs just once every 8 years. Kew's greenhouses hold specimens of one of nature's strangest plants. This growth, which looks like an entire tree, is actually just one leaf of a Titan arum. One day, the leaf will die back, and then a spectacular flower bud will emerge from the soil. The Titan is incredibly rare. It only grows wild in the jungles of Sumatra. It also produces the largest flower on Earth. The team will only get one chance to capture it.
Any particular plant only flowers about once every 7 years. But these days, botanic gardens have cracked the problem and are able to tell you roughly within 6 months or so when it's going to do its stuff.
The Titan, when it flowers in about a 2 to 4 hour period, and it's open for 2 nights if you're lucky. It flowers once, and you don't get a second stab at it. Not for another 8 years, anyway.
From the moment the tip bursts out of the soil, they're on high alert.
It takes about, I think, a week or so just to get up there and produce this 9-foot tall spire. You can almost hear it creaking as it's going up, and it grows sort of a couple of centimeters a day or something. It actually, I swear, as you're sitting alongside it, you feel that it's kind of pulsing.
You're basically going on the knowledge of some very experienced people here in Kew, and then you're throwing in an awful lot of luck into the equation, and you are coming in because it flowers at night, and you're basically sitting at it, watching it, hoping it flowers, and then making a decision that possibly at midnight it's not going to flower, so you go home and then come back the next day.
The call that the Titan was finally opening came late one night. The team rushed down and captured this. A sight that until recently could only have been witnessed by a handful of very committed botanists. The flower that you're looking at stands 7 feet tall.
We didn't know if we were going to get one during the making of this programme, and it's a fantastic opportunity.
It remains in bloom for just 2 days, and then it closes.
So the team has mimicked insect vision. We've seen them wrestling stunt bats and persuading mushrooms to perform on camera. Now they must prepare to work with an artiste less predictable and less cooperative than any they've met before. He will require constant reassurance. He will only arrive at the very last minute, and he will do nothing unless his personal dietary requirements are met. He's perfectly capable of simply walking away if he doesn't like what he sees, so this is a tense time for the crew.
Come on then, here's a good boy. Come on. It's cold, that's his trouble. He's not used to the...
I think it's quite good because it might slow him down a bit.
Come on, Tanky. Come on, Tank.
Tank actually was in the London Zoo, I want to say, and was thought to be geriatric, thought to be past it. And he just used to sit around and, you know, in the way tortoises do. So the zoo felt he wasn't a good exhibit, and we moved into my friend's house, who has a green fingers when it comes to animals. And he made pals with Tank, and he discovered what precise thing Tank really liked. And Tank then fertilized the first female Aldabran giant tortoise in this country and produced eggs. So he was a star.
He trapped his fingers, that was quite good.
Poor old Tanky wonders what's happening.
He's quite cranky. I mean, he's about 120, I think, and he has a mind of his own, and it's no good telling him, even if you've got a banana, which is his favourite food, that you want to move him over there. If Tank doesn't want to go, he's not going to go. You just have to go along with Tank.
Couldn't we carry him and put him over here?
You want him over there, Ma?
Well, he's going to go forward, so you wanted him behind where he wants to shoot.
Tank.
What? I know, but if you get him to walk this way, so that he ends up there, because if you put him in the right position, he's going to walk out of it.
Tank.
And point him that way. That's it. Fine. Okay.
Okay, right. So everybody else clears out now. Let David...
Come on, Pad. Out the way.
Clear the dog.
Action.
This is the most famous inhabitant of the island of Rodriguez. A giant tortoise. It loves bananas. Go on. But they also like green leaves, and that's their main food. So any plant growing close to the ground has very little chance of survival, while creatures like this are going around eating them.
If you've got an informative program and you have a job to convey some particular piece of important information, which has to be important because otherwise you shouldn't be occupying the screen, then you better make it clear, and you better do it neatly and unambiguously so that everybody knows what it is.
When it's small, it produces leaves that are very thin and not even green. And the tortoise, whose eyesight is not very good, doesn't even see it. So he takes very little notice of leaves like this, and the Café Marron can grow. As it grows, it becomes a bit bigger, and still its leaves are thin and dark and rather inconspicuous. And it's not until it's really quite tall does the Café Marron plant produce its proper green leaves and its flowers. But by that time, it's well beyond the reach of a giant tortoise. You can either do it well or sloppily, and I do my best to do it well.
The Kingdom of Plants team has spent a year at Kew. The very last thing they have to shoot is actually the opening of the whole series, David's introduction. For the last time, they must battle a problem that's been with them since the very beginning.
I filmed all over the world in so many different kind of situations and setups, but for me, technically, this has been one of the hardest challenges, is making that judgment call about whether something sounds good or sounds bad or whether there's too much plane. But we've got a very patient crew, got a very patient director.
We've been able to just push the technology because we wanted to do spectacular things with plants, and I think that's very exciting and very new for 3D.
The idea for this shot is deceptively simple. This crane will swoop down as David talks. But there's a slight issue that no one could have foreseen.
For all our filming, we've been filming here for a year, and the one day that we've got a crane coming happens to be the day that a hurricane, or the tail end of a hurricane, is actually hitting the UK right now.
The crane is a serious piece of kit, more than a ton of electronically controlled precision engineering.
This is a hydroscope crane, and basically put the camera on here and it concertinas out, 23 feet out, and then the crane goes up and down. We can move it as much as we want. This crane can be steady with a 30-knot wind. At the moment we have a 40-knot wind, so we're going to balance the camera up. That'll take a while, and we'll put the camera up there and see how steady it is. Obviously, if the camera moves, then we won't be able to get the shot we want.
There you go, Skip.
Still, with time ticking on and no chance to come back another day, they make the decision to go for it. In what the Met Office classifies as a gale, David prepares to deliver his lines. The wind lets up for just a second, and they seize the moment. This is our entry into the extraordinary kingdom of plants.
And action.
I've seen plants growing in their natural habitats all over the world, but here in Kew, it's possible to examine them in a way that is impossible in the wild. Here, some 90% of all known plant species are represented in one form or another. So in this one place, you can survey the entire plant kingdom, and what is more, using 3D cameras, reveal some of its most intimate secrets.
Kew houses vast treasures. In a year here, the team has covered a lot of ground. Given a unique site, cutting-edge technology, and a guide with an unrivaled knowledge of his subject, they've been able to see and show some of nature's most remarkable spectacles in a whole new way. This is our world, as it's never been seen before.